Today is Monday, November 11th, 2024. This is the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha. Tanya, can you verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Moving into our next general business item is the opportunity for public comment. Did we have anyone sign up?
We have none.
Okay. We are then moving into our action items for this evening. The first action item is the approval of minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of the November 11th, 2024, or I'm sorry, the October 24 Facilities and Finance meeting.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. Passes 4-0. The next action item is the approval of vouchers. Did we have any questions this month on vouchers?
There were no questions this month.
Okay, seeing no questions, I'd be looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed say no. Passes 4-0. Next, we are moving into the discussion and information items for this evening, and the first discussion item is the Airmark Food Service Report.
Yeah, Tim and Jared are here from Airmark to present an update. We did a similar report last year. I think we maybe did it in December, but just wanted to give you an idea of where we are so far this fiscal year. So I'll turn it over to them and let them introduce themselves and what their current roles are as of today with Airmark, because Jared, after a few years, is moving on to greener pastures, and Tim joined us in May,
May. Yep.
and is taking Jared's place. So a little transition. So we thought having them both here tonight would be a good way of walking you through that.
Hey everybody, hopefully you remember who I am, Jared. I'm not going anywhere, I'm still over Waukesha, so don't worry. But I have expanded my territory, not to just have Waukesha, but I've got, like 9 or 10 other districts as well. Waukesha is my largest, it is still my baby, so I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon.
I'm Tim Prendergast. I'm the new food service director here. It's great to meet everybody. Just wanted my face to be put with the name for the new food service director here. It's been a pleasure working in Waukesha so far. Darren and Heather have been fantastic allies for us, and really everybody in the district. From principals to teachers to maintenance staff have all been really fantastic partners. It's great to see how we all work together and everyone's really willing to work with each other. So it's been great. It's been fantastic to be in the district, and thank you for welcoming me. All right, so we just wanted to go through a little bit of meal participation review, just some updates for what we've been seeing in the year, what's going on, just kind of give a brief update to everybody. So these are some regulatory things, things that most people's eyes gloss over on. We can go right through into that one. There's really not a lot new going on for this year. What's coming in the future, there's going to be some changes to sodium content for the lunches in 2027. That's nothing that we need to deal with now, but that is coming in the future. There's some regulations on sugar, limiting added sugars. That's going to affect like flavored milk, like chocolate milk that we have. But the milk that we have will be reformulated to meet that regulation. So it's not really a lot. I know it's not the most exciting stuff, but did just want to give you some idea of the regulatory landscape and how that affects us in the district. State of the industry. The top 3 challenges are what they have been for the past several years. Increase in costs, staff shortages, menu item shortages. Prices are continue to increase. Prices are continuing to increase, but inflation's decelerating, so that's nice. It's not increasing as much, but that's something that we're always struggling with, or a challenge that we're always trying to meet. That is something that I think that we've been able to work with well with our suppliers and be able to handle, and there is inflation built into the contract to help deal with that a little bit. Staffing is always something that's a bit of a challenge. I'm sure you all know unemployment is super low. It's just there's not a ton of talent pool out there. But we have been having some success doing some more alternative stuff, reaching out, using more of our talent acquisition people at Aramark corporate. I actually sent out 4 offer letters in the last 2 days, which is great. So we have a bunch of new staff coming, which is really a sigh of relief. Yeah, so that's something that has been a struggle, but I think we are making very positive headway, and I feel confident and comfortable about that. And then menu item shortages, this is something that there are sometimes supply chain issues. We do buy everything from Buy America, so we don't have a ton of international problems with that. But there can be disruptions where we'll lose our, I don't know, if there's a hurricane, there's something that affects that local area, we may have to source out from different suppliers in different countries. So we try and work with our suppliers as best as we can. There's always going to be substitutions. You know, a truck breaks down somewhere, there's always going to be something happening like that. But we do have the flexibility to be able to handle that. That hasn't really been negatively affecting us that much here. All right, so wanted to dive into some numbers. I think this is really just the best way to get a snapshot of what's going on. The numbers that you're looking at are a specific data point. It's, I think it's 5 weeks that goes to October 20th. So it's the same data set from last year and from this year. It's the most apples to apples data that we could find. It includes the same number of days. It also includes a half day on the last day, which does affect lunch sales. So that was the most apt comparison that we could find. So it's those 5 weeks going to the end of October in both school years. So in elementary breakfast, we've done 24,459 breakfasts in that period. That's 2,951 over the prior year, which is pretty fantastic growth there. So if you look at it per day, that's 148 more breakfasts per day that we're serving over the time period in elementary schools. So that's something that I don't think we expected to see, or expect to see growth that was that high. But it's been very positive. It's been really great. I think introducing hot breakfast in more places last year did help, and we're seeing momentum from that continuing into this year. And I know getting kids to eat breakfast in the morning is always a plus. So I think we're doing something right if we're getting more and more going there.
I would just add that on top of that, I remember we sat here last year and we looked at the numbers and we marveled at the increase that we had. And I think the fear was like, it wasn't necessarily a fear, but we kind of started thinking like, when are we going to hit that number where we plateau, where we physically can't feed kids who physically aren't at school anymore? And so as we go through these numbers and Tim talks to you through those, it's kind of crazy to see 11 months later we're still climbing from there when we were at a point last year when we weren't sure how much more we could go. So testament to Tim and his team here and what they've been able to do.
All right, so elementary lunch here, we did 39,283 in that period. This is a drop from last year of 1,200. That's 62 less meals than we did last year. That's certainly a place for growth. That's something that immediately we started looking into where the opportunities are to stem some of those losses and get more growth going, and there's certainly opportunities there. One thing that is affecting us, we're kind of rowing against the current of declining enrollment. So there's 115 less elementary students in the district this year than there were last year. So losing 62 a day, while it doesn't feel great, it feels like less of a blow knowing that some of that is because of enrollment decrease, and it's hard for us. We can't feed kids that aren't there. We can't feed kids that don't exist. So we're going to try to continue to bridge that gap, get those 62 hopefully to an even number year over year. But that is something that we're looking in specifically, what schools are having the most enrollment decline, which schools are not, and trying to figure out how to get the meal participation up in all those places. All right, middle school breakfast. This is, again, great to see growth in breakfast. It's only 126 more meals per year, meals over the same period, 6 per day. But again, in light of that enrollment drop, and we're seeing that decline in lunches, it's nice to see the breakfast going up. So 6 more per day. Would we like to see more? Yeah, but with the enrollment decline, seeing at least a positive number is great there. Lunch, same thing here at middle schools. We're seeing in elementary about 60 per day. There's a little bit of a slower drop. There's 101 less students in the middle schools this year versus last year. But we still did 24,000 middle school lunches in that 5-week period. So again, we want to see more. We're going to dig in and see where we can do more growth. There are some mitigating factors that are contributing to those numbers dropping a little bit. High school breakfast. Again, we're seeing another increase, which is great. It's not, 4,000 isn't a huge number served, but that 878 is. That's a very large percentage. It's really hard to get high school kids to eat breakfast, let alone eat it with us. I'm sure you all know. So that's something that's really encouraging for us to see. We're serving 44 more breakfasts in high schools, which again doesn't seem like a huge number, but the numbers are so small to begin with that it really is a percentage. That's a great leap that we're seeing. That's really encouraging to me. I like seeing that. Lunch, 69 more per day, 1,300 over the same period, and that's with a drop of 117 students, so that's encouraging to see. We'll go into some of this when we have some slides later, but I think some of that is attributed to some more alternative things we're doing, like the pod that we installed at South High School is driving some meal growth there. So that's something that's great to see, that in light of those enrollment declines, we're still getting growth there. Would we like to see more? Absolutely. I think there is room for more, but there is some growth happening there already. All right, so this is combined, everything there from year over year, 32,871 breakfasts. We did 3,800 more. 84,000 lunches. We did 1,100 less. But we served 2,758 more meals. If you combine both, we did 2,700 more meals this year than we did last year, and there are 333 less students enrolled in the district. So that's positive, encouraging numbers. I'd love to see that lunch number become flat or a positive. The breakfast growth is fantastic, and we'll continue to try and feed that for sure. All right, so this is the pod, the Provisions on Demand system that we installed at South High School. You'll see when we get to the next slide, we put on branding that's specific to the school. This is just right after it was installed. Yep, there you go. Can you go back one more, Heather? The transactions that we're doing about 230 transactions a day just at this location. I know that this looks like it's just a convenience store, and I think part of it is designed to look that way because that's appealing to a lot of high school kids, but there are actually compliant reimbursable meals being served out of this. So if you look on the left, kind of not quite to the cash register, there's a hot chute there, like, yep, right there. So there's like burgers, chicken sandwiches, they're putting pizza in there. The kids can grab their fruit, they can get whatever they need to make their meal compliant. In the cold fridge in the middle, there's salads, there's sandwiches. The kids are getting fully compliant reimbursable meals through here. It's not just, a la carte items and beverages that they're getting. And all the a la carte items that are there, they're all Smart Snack compliant. They're like the much healthier versions that these companies are putting out. So it's not like total junk that kids would go out and get at an actual convenience store. It is all Smart Snack compliant stuff that's going on there. So it's nice. We're doing 230 transactions there. We're selling about 25 different items a day. It's going great for us. I think the principal was a little bit hesitant at first about how this would go over, you can go to the next slide, how it would go over, how this would affect flow in the hallway or students or anything like that. And now she's totally on board. It's been going super well. There have really not been many issues. The kids have learned how to use it, kind of the flow of traffic, how it needs to go through. It has not been disruptive as far as I can tell, and I haven't heard anything. Really has not been disruptive at all, and it's just been a great alternative and another opportunity for kids to use it. I don't know if they have a study hall during lunch closer to a teacher's room that's over at that end. They don't have to run all the way to the cafeteria on the other end. They're able to do that. It's been a lot more convenient for them. Talking just purely about numbers and growth, last year we were doing about 650 transactions per day at South High School. Now we're doing 710. So it's a growth for about 60 transactions a day. You saw on the previous slide we're doing it was about 250 transactions a day. So we are cannibalizing some of the business that was going on in the cafeteria. It's moving down to the pod, which I think is to be expected. But you are seeing about 60 meals per day growth that I think you can attribute directly to the pod here. So I think overall it's been a great success. We're always going to keep trying to learn how the kids want to use it, what they want to see there, how we can, maximize its potential. But so far, it's been going fantastic. I have not heard any negative things, and the kids seem to really enjoy it, and staff does as well. So that's great.
As Tim mentioned, the principal, it took some convincing. She was afraid there'd be a lot of issues, and I think her assistant principals and everyone would be dealing with issues tied to this pod. And it wasn't maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I saw her, and she goes, "We absolutely love it." Kids are, like you said, once they figured out the flow of it, the purpose of it, it's really, it was nice to see her come full
Absolutely.
circle on the topic,
Yeah.
because she was like, I don't know, but, and kudos to Airmark. We joked that we actually started this conversation
5 years
about
ago.
2 years before COVID, so this is 6 years in the making. So it's nice to see it being as successful as we thought it would be.
Yeah, and I think it was very strategic, when we decided to put it at South. We obviously know high schools are open campus, and when you think of South, you think of the Pick and Save that's right there. You think of all the restaurants that are right there that are easy to go to. So it was an easy decision to let's look at South, let's figure out how we can keep kids on campus. Some of the problems that we had identified when we thought about bringing this option up was, hey, we have 2 lunches, and even before that it might have been 1 during COVID. It's like, how do we keep kids here? And I think one of the problems that we realized was, hey, it gets really congested during that lunch period because everyone rushes in, everyone needs to get their lunch. There's a finite time that they have to eat, so why not put a pod, something like this, where you can get reimbursable meals. So whether you're free, reduced, or paid, you can get a reimbursable meal. And let's put it on the opposite side of the school, because we all know where the cafe is. It's kind of on one side of the school. Let's put it over here so it creates some relief from the cafe, and we're definitely seeing that relief in the cafe. Kids are able to get through the line much quicker than they've ever been able to, just because of this option being out there. Another thing Tim's working on is, I know we do second chance breakfasts at all of our high schools. So, hey, if you're not able to get your first breakfast, it's not you get a second breakfast, but let's say you missed your breakfast or you didn't get it on time. A lot of our schools, even at West or North, we kind of set up a little station outside in between first and second period. Kids that are passing by can come through and be like, hey, I want to get my breakfast, and do that. Well, we keep the pod open at South in between that time frame, and so we keep it open for a little bit longer, so kids are passing and we get an opportunity to feed them. We're technically allowed, based on USDA, to feed them all the way up until lunch. Now, we don't keep it all the way up open until lunch because we have to be able to transition from breakfast to lunch, but we've seen some really good success with that. Another reason why we're seeing our breakfast numbers at the high school slowly start to creep up a little bit more. Breakfast is starting to become cool in the high school now.
Yeah, if I could, just to clarify the numbers on the 2 slides. So on the first slide, it says the pod is generating 230 transactions per day. The second one that shows it with the Black Shirt Express branding says an average of 650 transactions per year.
Yep, so sorry if that wasn't made clear. The number that we're looking at here, the 650, that's for the South High School as a whole. That's not just at the pod. The first slide is how many transactions we're doing, 230 a day just at that pod at the location you're looking at. The second slide would be the cafeteria plus the pod.
That's all reimbursable.
All the transactions that we're doing. So the 650 is last year without a pod. The 710 is with a pod. So understanding that 230, some of that's getting cannibalized, obviously, into the pod, into the cafe as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so just wanted to give an update, just some pictures so you can see, visually what we're doing. These are a couple of meals that you can see. These are actual meals that we're serving in the schools. These aren't like photo op pictures. These are just taken from what was being served in the school that day. Our executive chef, Jill, has her leads take pictures as often as they can. It's every day in a lot of cases, as often as they can. So we have them so we can send them out in our newsletter, but also to present some of that here. You'll see at the bottom there's something that doesn't look like a school lunch. That's some of the catering that Jill does. I know the catering is getting very popular with staff, with district staff, with principals, all that. Jill really enjoys doing that. It lets her be a little bit more creative. She has fun with it. But it's been really great seeing that, and because I think that furthers our relationship between Aramark and the district. People rely on us, they trust us. It's been great to see that. Some more catering in the upper left-hand side. On the right, that's one of our deli stations where students can come in just like they're going to Jimmy John's and order what they want on their sandwich. It's made a la minute right there for them. They can get it toasted if they want. That's very attractive and very popular. I think that drives a lot of students staying rather than going out. They get to pick exactly what they want. It's made fresh for them right in front of them. It's very popular. It's great. That's a salad bar right below. That would be, I think that one's at South High School. Yeah, it's great looking. It looks like when you would go to executive dining or even a college campus cafeteria, it's presented really nice. There's great stuff in there. The kids really like it. They use it. They utilize it. It's fantastic. Yeah, but just wanted you to see some pictures of what we're actually doing that aren't, professional model photographers doing food modeling stuff. That's actually from in the district here. All right, so marketing promotions. The things that I think that drive that drive excitement for us are the limited time offer. We call them LTOs on the right-hand side of that slide. We have one every month. It's something new that's not on the 5-week menu cycle that we do to keep things new, keep things interesting. Part of it for Aramark, I think, is also gauging feedback if that's an item that could possibly go onto the regional menu for us in the future. We just did the fall brunch plate, which was awesome. I wish I brought a picture of that. It was pancakes that had a cranberry apple compote on it, and it went over super well, especially at the high schools. We had some of Aramark VPs in just kind of visiting the district, and they were kind of bowled over by how great it looked. Our staff had fun making it. It was something new they got to get out of their routine normally. But the students loved it. It was really nice, vibrant plate. It drove a lot of interest. The kids liked it. So that's fantastic. It's a great opportunity to, I think, drive interest in the school lunch program for the kids. You'll see on the left some of these other things that we'll do just to drive interest. Breakfast for lunch is obviously hugely popular. We try and capitalize on that. Quesadilla day, things like that, mac and cheese day. We do a Friendsgiving lunch coming up in November. Just different things to try and keep kids interested and drive interest in the school lunch program. All right, so growth and opportunities, elementary school. As I mentioned before, hot breakfast I think has been something that's been a boon for us. So we're going to continue that. Reintroduce cold and dry items to provide variety so kids can get either hot breakfast or their cereal in the morning. They're getting a choice. It's not just one item. We're going to continue to look into what's doing well at different schools to try and get the most popular things from our regional menu out there for the kids. Fresh fruits and vegetables that we've been doing for a while, we're going to continue to do. It's great because it draws down on the commodity allotment from the federal government that the district gets, so that saves money for the district. It provides fresh fruits and veggies for the kids, and believe it or not, they actually do eat them. Some kids are actually excited about them. I'm always very surprised when I go into an elementary school and the kids are like very excited about but I see kids like grabbing bags of spinach and stuff, like edamame beans, stuff I thought that they would never ever get, and they're excited about and getting. So if you do put it out in front of them often enough, eventually they will start to get into it and like it. So that's always great to see. We're starting to introduce second entree offerings at more schools where possible, and the principals think it's not going to be disruptive. The kids can come up if they're still hungry and get a second entree. They go up, they check and make sure that there's money on their account before they come up. Then we'll try and pad in numbers so we have enough left over to give seconds to kids. I think it's, I always want to feed a kid if they come up and say I'm hungry and I want more to eat. Like, we never want to say no to that, so we're going to try and introduce that where we can. There's some issues, I think, at certain schools where principals would be concerned about, is that disruptive? Is there enough time? So we're going to consult with schools on a one-on-one basis. We're not going to just launch that everywhere, but where it works and we can, we're going to do that to try and up the numbers and grow the program there. Middle school and high school, again, just trying to find what works from our regional menu. Display plates is something that we found really works with the kids. Instead of them just looking at whatever is in a, a serving hot tray. We actually make up the plate. We make it look nice. We put it up on top of where we serve and we have these risers that angle it up so they can see it. I think everyone likes to eat with their eyes. They don't want to just look at, what's being scooped out. They like to see the finished thing. So that's been helpful for us. Speeding up service, that's something where I think a lot of kids, I think, are actively discouraged. Like, I don't want to wait in line that long. I'd rather go out or just not eat lunch because I just don't feel like waiting in line. So speeding up service has been a big focus for us. The pod at South has been great for that. When you double the amount of service locations you have, obviously it's going to reduce some congestion. So we're continuing to look into how we can speed up service and how that does affect the meal participation rate. We're going to continue our limited time offers, special event promotions, breakfast carts. We do have those second chance breakfast carts. I think we're going to explore putting breakfast carts in different locations maybe and meet the kids where they come into school in the morning. So they walk in and there's a breakfast cart right there and like, oh, I can grab this, grab my juice, put my number in, and go to where I'm going and not have to go all the way to the cafeteria to get it. Or kids are late a lot, like high school kids are late a lot. If they're right there, they have 20 seconds to grab a breakfast and go rather than having to take a couple minutes. They're already late or they're going to be late if they do that. So that's something that we're going to try and introduce as soon as possible. And like I said, the second chance breakfast we're going to continue. So thank you for sitting and listening to us. Thanks for giving us the opportunity here. And if you have any questions, be happy to hear them, happy to answer them to the best of our ability.
Any questions? Mr. Wad?
Yes, thank you. So I got a couple, unrelated. I was curious, obviously with the results of last week's election, and in particular, one of the surrogates for President-elect Trump being an advocate around having a healthier and safer food supply. Do you have any sense of whether or not there will be any significant changes to the dietary requirements or anything relative to some of the regulations that, you called out, but I don't know if those are based on proposed policies or policies that have been have been approved,
No,
but not enacted yet, or?
The ones that you saw up there with kind of the state of the industry, those have already been enacted by the USDA, and those are already now. What happens with this new administration, I don't exactly know, but I know we as a corporation, even School District of Waukesha, we've already kind of have our ducks in a row, kind of, the milk is already formulated, so we don't have to change that. So we are going to move forward with whatever the USDA has already proposed, and obviously, as a corporation, regardless of what changes get made down the pipe, not only us, but everyone else that's out there will have to follow along as well. But to my knowledge, not that I'm aware of yet.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other question. So you had called out early on one of the challenges that you face is related to staffing, like many employers today, right? I'm just wondering if there's a connection between that and one of the challenges you called out in the middle and high school, and that's the speed of service. Is speed of service related at all to any staffing issues you have, or is it more just the volume? And
I would say that there's some correlation, and you would think there'd be a pretty strong correlation, but it's not as big as you would think it would be. So let's say, for example, I have somebody out at, let's say, at a high school, at South High School. If they're out and we can't serve what we need to that day because the work isn't going to get done or we can't serve, we'll just remove one of the lines that day if we have to. So then there's one less option for the kids, but essentially they're getting it in the same time. There's still one person working each register. There's still the right amount of people at each service station that needs to be. And generally our service stations aren't staffed by 2 people unless it's something that's very intensive, like those limited time offerings sometimes.
Right.
So that might put students, instead of them being spread at 4 stations, they're going to 3 of them. But from what I've seen, it's not as big of an issue as you would think it would be. Granted, if there's one person at an elementary school where we normally have 2, that would be a big issue, but that never happened. Like, I'm in an elementary school covering, like I was at the STEM elementary school today, because we're not going to let an elementary school go with one person.
Right.
It would just be chaos. It would take too long. It's not going to, that's just never going to happen. But if for whatever reason we found ourselves in that situation, yeah, you would see a very big increase in speed of service if that were to happen.
I would just add, just from me being here for the last 3-4 years, we haven't had a ton of turnover, and the longstanding employees that we do have are so seasoned that you don't even realize if we are short-staffed, you don't even realize it. And what's beautiful about it too is not only Tim, but he mentioned Jill and then Laura, our registered dietitian, they're flying around and helping out at locations. So in terms of like closed stations, you'll rarely find that, just because we do have subs that we try to call and bring it. So again, I would agree with him. There might be a little bit of a correlation, but I don't think it's as much as you would think.
Thank you.
Dr. Piasek?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Jared, we're going to be sad to see you move on to bigger things, but we'll get to see you a little bit. The team has done a really nice job, I think, with the catering side, not just here at Blair, but I think across the district. So kudos. And I think to your point, it is, we think about school lunches. We don't think about some of the more gourmet things and the fact that kids will eat more complex meals if we give them the opportunity. So I do appreciate the creativity that you all have brought. I wanted to talk about the portion piece a little bit, because I know a couple years ago we were trying to bring on the bigger portions for middle school, that we got stuck because there's caloric limitations. And when you mentioned the second entree, is that an elementary? You said Meadowbrook as a pilot, I think was mentioned. How is that going to work? And related to that is, how does that work from a pricing perspective? And how do parents manage that?
You want to take it?
Sure. I can take it if you want me to. So that is all a la carte. So it's a second entree is charged at the same rate. So the USDA and DPI kind of like work together. It's charged as an a la carte item. So if a lunch is $2.55 and they want a second entree, it would be charged $2.55. Now, what the USDA will tell you is if a student comes up and they want to get another meal, you can't provide them that meal. So that's the entree, the milk, the fruits, the veggies, everything, because that becomes non-compliant just from like the caloric intake and everything that you have to do. But they can get a second entree if they want. So we have always done that in the high schools and the middle schools, but really I think it really stemmed from an instance at an elementary school where a student was hungry. So we, after they had already gotten their reimbursable meal and wanted to come up, they had money in their account. So it was just an opportunity for us to say like, hey, we want to feed you. And we hate saying like, but the rules tell us we can't. So let's just see what we can do. And we'll always obviously advocate for the kids just as much as you guys always do. So that was a conversation, hopefully that, if those instances continue like the elementary schools, we can kind of go down that path to see if that's a viable option with the principals, talking with Darren, talking with Heather to see if that's something that schools want to do. So it's a compliant second entree, so it's not a reimbursable meal that the school district gets reimbursed on anything there. It's technically a la carte, and then a la carte dollars get equivalized technically into meals, which the school district gets reimbursed for those.
I think to clarify, when a second entree is served to a kid, the caloric content of that doesn't count towards the limit because it's not part of the reimbursable federal
not
program,
reimbursed,
correct?
correct.
So that's why we're able
Yep.
to do that.
Yep.
Thank you. That was my question. Isn't that interesting? Okay. Thank you.
Correct.
So if I think about where we were 3 years ago when we were restarting to look at all of this, one of the pieces that we talked a lot about was the expansion of the pod services. So South was the first one. I thought we were going to go for, is North slated? Isn't this at all?
Depending on if the year stays like this, we have North and West. We're going to start looking. The biggest challenge we just met last week and talked about this is finding a space in a hallway. Where they're at now, it kind of, by the auditorium, it kind of widens like a triangle, right? So it just fit in there perfect. So now our challenge is, and I've asked these gentlemen and then Chad Caribou from the service building to go, let's start looking for a location where we don't have to take out a classroom or cut into a classroom or trophy cases and all the other things that you're asked to work around usually. But the way it's going, we see this expanding to those two other high schools. And a lot quicker that we've already been state approved this time.
Yes.
We all went through a learning lesson. We got all 3 pods approved so we can go and we don't have that hurdle anymore. But yeah, I think the way it's going, we'll find somewhere for it. Might not look identical to this one, or might, you know, because
No, it'll look different. I was going around west last week. Like there are some. It looks like some places that possibly could work. Again, like I'm not the fire marshal, so they'll have a say over a lot of those things. But yeah, there's some places it won't look like it does at South, but I think there is some opportunity there for sure.
Oh, and that's good. It was just something that we were committed to continuing to advance and push through. The second item that we had talked about in the past is the surveys, whether that was at the QR codes or through discussion with the students at the end of the lunch line where they could fill something out.
Yep.
I'm curious as to the feedback that we are getting, absent that I don't think that we're doing that yet. And it was just something we talked about
Yep.
kind of in doing. However, I'm really impressed and happy with the growth that we're seeing at the high school, especially since you go to Quick Trip around lunchtime and you're about to get run over with the activity. But to see that the volume is increasing at the high school level, I think is a really good testament to the things that we are doing and seeing, that I think expanding and having the good quality food and all of those pieces is really valuable.
We appreciate that. One thing that I would say in regards to the surveys that we have rolled out, we have rolled out a principal survey. One of our key stakeholders among a lot of stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, et cetera, is the principal surveys. So we have got a lot of valuable feedback, and Tim has been following up with them. There's a list of questions on, rating 1 through 5, and Tim's been sitting down and reaching out and say, hey, can we talk about these? Where can we improve? What are we doing really well? And kind of getting that feedback. And then the pulse surveys are definitely the QR codes with the high schools. We'll absolutely be implementing that as soon as that second semester rolls out. We actually just talked about that on a call last month. So we'll get those rolled out as soon as possible.
Okay, because, I want to kind of push on this a little bit, because one of the commitments that we had was even like quarterly stakeholder groups and having the feedback. Now, with the volumes doing what they are doing despite a declining enrollment, that is encouraging, because if the numbers are going up, it tells me that they like the food, they like what we're getting.
Yep.
And that alone speaks a lot. But I think that part of the commitment when we went through the whole contract renegotiation on how we can grow and evolve was to make sure that we were getting stakeholder feedback.
Yep. So, and we talked about that, what that looks like with 19 schools or 20 schools, and how does that look? Are you taking 2 or 3 kids from each one? Are we piloting it at this school and then kind of expanding? Absolutely. Those are discussions that we're having internally right now. So thank you for the reminder.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Well, thank you. Again, this was great. This is 2 years in a row of really seeing some tremendous improvement and benefits, and really seeing that there's a lot of enjoyment with the food. I will speak for us. We enjoy. That I have a
We got
deal
your,
with.
yeah, we got your,
right?
we're going to get your catering taken care of. We got you.
Thank you. Looks
Yep.
good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Nice
Guys,
meeting you.
appreciate it.
Good luck, Jared.
All right, our next discussion item is the district budget development.
a handful of different data points and things to think about, and then we'll talk about 25, 26, and primarily it's the budget assumptions that I just want us to review, because we'll be completing the long-range budget projection in December. I don't know if we'll be back here in time for our December meeting, but we're hoping to be there. So to make those projections viable, we all have to have some buy-in into a set of assumptions, otherwise we're just kind of chasing different topics. But one thing about October, when we close out a budget cycle, is all of a sudden we get all these numbers and we don't really have time to, I'm back here within 2 weeks of the board meeting saying, all right, this is it, these are all the set numbers. So I just wanted to draw your attention to a few items, and we don't need that one anymore. The first one is on the executive summary, and I think we all agree the tax rate is not always the perfect measure of taxation, but it is probably the most talked about measure of taxation. So I don't think we should shy away from being the lowest tax rate for a K-12 school district in the Waukesha County. And then I did the average and then the delta between us and the listed schools. So when you factor in where we are heading with our debt service levy, I know there's a lot of there's a whole new biennial budget, and there's new people, and there's new maps, and all these things. But with us dropping off our debt pretty rapidly over the next budget cycle, we're in a good spot where we could end up with a tax rate around $5. So if you value that as your measure of taxation, I think we have a story to tell. I also included in board docs the actual levies by school district as well, because I think that's interesting. It's hard to compare. We all factor in differently. We all have different outcomes with the aid formula, so it's hard to get like these linear comparisons and do, aid per kid or levy per kid. And we're all over the place, as we talked about prior, with how much debt we have and how much, Fund 39 is impacting other school districts' levies. But I share this just because I think it's interesting. For example, Fund 80 levy, which is community service, some of those school districts, you go, well, how can they possibly have such a huge community service? They run the rec department. So there's different structures involved as well. But overall, I think if you look at where we are in Fund 80, factoring in that I believe Menominee Falls runs the rec department, I think we tend to be pretty conservative in what we funnel through Fund 80. We brought it down a little bit because I've never seen Fund 80, and we're going to talk about fund balance in just a little bit here, is a place where we're trying to accumulate fund balance. So I often buy down or under levy to use the fund balance as we're going. But again, just a data point, I think we had one of the few levies that was down this year. So I think we have a good, and certainly had the largest drop in valuation in Waukesha County as well. So I think there's a good story to be had there. What's a budget discussion without talking about enrollment? People will say we never talk about it, so I make a point of it. I thought it was interesting to hear when I saw Airmark's draft presentation. I thought it was a good example how enrollment rolls through everything we do, whether it's teacher FTE, busing, food service, just our general operation. So this is our third Friday count. Now this is resident pupil count. This isn't the number of kids that we're serving in our schools. But the head count that you would say, the kids who are being served, trends at the same as this line. So I always share this, and this is what the multiplier is for our funding. So we were down again this year. 2012 was our high water mark that I only went back so far, but at 13,143, and this is just the fall count. And then this past year, we're at 10,559 resident students, and again, that trend is projected to increase in the years ahead, or continue in the years ahead. A topic that might come up in the state biennial budget is the impact on our levy and local school districts' levy, because again, we're asked to levy for the voucher programs. And that's for this year for Waukesha, the choice, I call them choice, all of them are choice programs to me, but the amount of levy dollars that went towards that. Now, there's always a matching expenditure with that, right? They increase our revenue authority, they increase our expenditures. So it's a net zero, but really it's the tax impact. And this year it was $6.7 million, almost $6.8 million of levy that we were asked to add into our final tax levy for kids who are not educated in our buildings. So we get to do their bookkeeping. People will say, well, that's exactly the impact of the choice programs, and I've always questioned that a little bit because some of those kids would come to us. So they would get counted and they would be part of our levy. How many, what percentage, I can't possibly tell you that, but I can tell you that for this year's levy, 8.5% of that levy was for the choice programs. And that's one of the things at the state budget that I think our state organizations are trying to do is get that off of our levy and make it more of an operational statewide cost, just like transportation or anything else.
Yeah, do we have any sort of a trend that shows us like what the total dollars are each year that we're?
Yeah, it's been growing because it's not a very, it's not been around tremendous amount of time, but this past year, our assumption was 15% growth in the dollars, whether that was from student growth or funding per student
Yep.
growth, and it came in at 14%.
Okay.
So, actually, I can provide that, maybe I'll throw that in the update
Yeah,
this week.
I think it would be interesting to see how that number's growing and whether it's starting to level off or it's accelerating. I don't know that I have a good feel for it one way or the other, so
Yeah, no, I'll add that in the update.
thank you.
So again, if we wouldn't have had those costs and that levy put upon us, instead of a 2.47% levy decrease, we would have had a 10.8% levy decrease going forward. Now, some people would say, well, this is the cost of educating students in our community. Have at it. It's however you want to, whatever lens you want to look at related to that. All right. And then, as I mentioned, for 25, 26, even though it seems hard to believe that's a number we're even dealing with yet, I have the preliminary budgets, and it might seem funny, Darren, all the things that go on in the school district, and you have a one-page document that are being used, and there are other assumptions beyond this, but these are the drivers. The first one is resident enrollment. We're budgeting a 2% drop in the September count, which is about 211 students. Revenue limit authority, current legislation is a $325 increase for the next 400 years, or 399, I'm sorry.
Right.
399 years. And we're currently at 11,325. Open enrollment, we really kind of freeze that, both the amount, because you're really budgeting the spread. We have the same amounts as they have right now, and the same student population utilizing open enrollment. As the year goes on and open enrollment kind of matures, because it kind of flows, we might alter that, but for this initial budget projection, we're just leaving those numbers constant. And then the per pupil aid, this is aid we get for every resident student. This is also part of the revenue limit calculation. We're leaving it at $742, and it's been there for a handful of years now, so, but there's a lot of possibilities on what that could become.
Yeah. Going back to revenue limit authority, and perhaps I'm wrong about this, but I'm almost certain I saw that the Supreme Court has taken, the state Supreme Court is going to be taking a look at that $325 increase. Do we know anything about when that will be heard, or would we expect anything on that prior to?
I would like to see it. Preferably, you'd like to see it in April or May, because the state biennial budget will be completed in theory in July. So you'd hate to have it go beyond July, because then I don't know how that would all work. But there is a legal challenge as to the viability of that type of language change in the state budget.
Right, and while we're on the topic of the Supreme Court, I know that there was a circuit court that had ruled Act 10 was unconstitutional, and that's now been appealed to the Supreme Court. Do we have any sense for where that's at, or if there's any action planned in the coming court session?
There's a lot of opinions on that. My 2 cents is you won't hear a ruling until after the election, would be my guess, for the Supreme Court. There's a seat coming up. One of the theories I have is that might slow this, and I don't know, because obviously there's a huge push to reverse it, right? Is there's no legislation to go to in terms of bargaining. What do we all do? Do we pull out the 2011-12 contract and say this is the base year? I don't think you can do that. Are we going back to mediation and arbitration? There's no legislation that I'm aware of that's left, so I don't know where we transition to. So all of us, actually, I had a meeting with the Waukesha County business officials on Friday, and we are all just status quo. I mean, that's the only thing, because the range of possible conclusions to that conversation are just all over the place. So we'll see. Act 10 came down very quickly. Maybe the reversal comes down just as quickly, or they see it's such a big problem that the path out of it is kind of murky as well. So actually, on the expense side, I'm assuming CPI right now, the current estimations that we're looking at are between 3 and 3.5%. So there is Aramark mentioned earlier, CPI is slowing. Now it's growing as a bigger number off of a bigger base, but somewhere in that range is where we think it'll come in. As of now, we're assuming that the base wage costing methodology that we've used since Act 10 was implemented would be continued. But then there's also the supplemental things that the board is oftentimes asked to talk about. Now, the budget calendar for 25, 26 is attached as well. Come spring, when like health insurance estimates for renewals and all that, we'll start talking about compensations, and that's, you know, one of those strings of decisions you make heading into summer. So there's a lot more to be had with that conversation on top of, as David mentioned, Act 10 in its status. Health insurance, our normal approach to that, just for the projection, is a 5% increase in funding rates. We're self-funded, so we technically don't have premiums. And what that says is if it's over 5%, plan design changes would drive us back down 5%. If we want to continue to look at health insurance to balance a budget, we would go lower, but you need some number in there for a projection. So this is the process we've used for several years. So it doesn't take if health insurance comes in at 4%, it doesn't take it off the table. But again, we have to agree on something to have a projection that has some meaning. Dental insurance, not nearly as expensive of topic, not much there. We do have a bus contract for next year, so that'll provide some guidance. And I think one other thing that'll happen, Heather built the current year's budget, and I think it'll be a lot easier for all of us next year. We'll have that big drop off in routes. ESSER's gone, stipends are gone, so we're really developing a clean year to project more effectively going forward. But student transportation, I believe it's 8.75% increase. Utilities, we have 6% in there. This is kind of well, for several reasons, I guess, an interesting number. We're having an incredibly mild run so far, and we've also put in a lot of higher efficiency equipment than we've had so far. So I think in my mind, we are building somewhat of a new base year for budgeting off of in the future, assuming winter it ends up being whatever average is anymore. So we're watching that. And then you had mentioned for the parental choice programs, for assumption, I'm going to do 15% increase again, just because it held true this past year. And then at this point, we really don't get into tax rate and levy and equalization aid. It's really, can we pay our bills with the revenue limit authority that we're projecting? Because I can project that. State legislation's another 325. We have enrollment trend data that is usually fairly accurate. But figuring out what aid is, not to mention MPS, not to mention all these operational questions, not to mention all these other factors, at this point, you're really kind of shooting in the dark, I guess. We will come in spring with kind of, if you remember, I usually lay out 2 or 3 aid scenarios just to kind of give you some bookend information. And then we will have to agree on an aid estimate for the preliminary budget in summer. So those are the assumptions that we're looking at, and I can answer any questions, or if there's some area of the budget you want some guidance on that maybe I didn't list, I'd be happy to answer that as well.
Dr. Piasek?
Thank you. It's funny how we just turn it around in the following week and start talking about the next year, having no more clear picture of that than maybe we did a few weeks back. But I'm just reminded of a report that the Legislative Fiscal Bureau put out following the MPS referendum last year, and they articulated that the impact of their increased spending would actually start to affect the aid payments for other districts in the 25-26 school year. If I recall, the line item tagged to School District of Waukesha was the potential to be down $2 million on the state aid if there wasn't some correction that was made. Also, there were quite a few operating and capital referenda that passed last week. and those expenditures as they, advance through subsequent years will just continue to snowball. I think it's something like, I think I counted 190 plus school districts in the calendar year 2024 had at least one referendum question on the ballot. So we probably need to keep in mind that without any adjustments at the state level on the aid equation, that once those expenditures begin on those operating referenda, that's going to impact.
Yeah, and they'll stagger in. The operational questions will hit quicker than the debt because a large capital improvement project, you'll have a year of planning and then a year of, so, but the dollars are incredible and there will be that impact.
Well, the MPS expenditures the impact was targeted to be felt in the 25, 26.
Correct.
So
That's earlier,
next
right?
school year.
Because they've already approved, right? So I was looking at aid, just kind of getting just some general ideas of how we might approach it. There was an adjustment on our aid formula of a positive 1.5 or $6 million after our negative 850,000. To me, you take that off, and as a base number to work from is that, not the net number, but the original number. And that's, to me, is the baseline for projecting aid up or down. So it'll be 1.5 million or 1.6 million less than what we got. But that whole section is just still so fuzzy, and now these referendums are going to pile on top of that confusion. So it'll be interesting to see.
So that, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau report, I think, was based off of last year's aid, and our aid came in substantially higher this year. So I think I would assume we would have to kind of go in with the assumption that it's based on the 23-24 aid payment,
I would assume that. Yeah.
which could be substantial swing for us.
It could be. Or we start looking better in the aid formula because we're not spending as much. So you might have some win on that side, but there's just so many variables involved, it's really hard to predict where we're going to end up.
But just to boil it down, I know I ask this question a lot because I want it to become known widely. When school districts increase their spending beyond their revenue limit, whether it's through an operational or a capital borrowing, when they increase their expenses, that increases the aid they're eligible for. And I know it may not be directly one-on-one because it has to do with the equalized property values and so forth. But as a general rule, say Madison passing a $600 million referendum is likely to impact negatively our state aid because they will be spending more and therefore may and likely will be eligible for additional state aid.
I think that's more likely than not.
And then when we consider the fact that there were, how many did you say, Mrs. Piasek, that passed? 190, did you say?
No, there were 191 districts with questions. There were upwards of 80% of the 133 that were on the last ballot.
And if I remember correctly, it was
93.
roughly 2.6 billion in referendums that passed just last Tuesday, roughly in that
It
neighborhood?
was more than that.
Was it more than
3.
that? Was it closer to 3?
It was over 3, I think. I don't remember the.
Yeah, the total number requested, I actually have it here somewhere. The total number requested was like
was 4,
4.5
yeah.
billion, and it was about, I want to get the right number.
Yeah.
But it's a big number.
So I guess where I'm going with this, it's a couple of things. The first is, of course, reminding people in our community that we may think it's unimportant what happens in school districts in Eau Claire or Wauwatosa or Mukwonago, regardless how far or close they are. They actually can be essentially taking tax money out of our pockets as a result of passing referendums that are being voted on only by their local residents. And so I don't want anyone to be shocked by this if, to your point, Dr. Piasek, we start seeing less in state aid than we would expect because other districts are basically taking a bigger piece of the state aid pie by spending more in their district. And that's an observation if that's not,
I think for the most part, and for the larger dollar referendums, I think that's probably 90% true, but you do have some negative aided.
yeah.
Like if, Elmbrook,
Yep,
or Whitefish Bay, or someone like that who is already getting very little aid, they might actually push more dollars back into the aid formula. But
Correct.
the big dollar ones that you saw out there, the Green Bays, the
Yep.
Milwaukee with their operation, they're taking.
yep. So the other thing that, and the other reason I raise this, and we're fortunate because we will have a recently reelected state senator joining our policy committee after this. We need to start, I think, really leaning on our legislature to start looking at this whole question of fairness to districts like ours who are pushing to go debt-free, that are finding ways, and I don't have the number right in front of me, but over the last 10 years, we're essentially flat in terms of our
Levy.
in terms of our levy. We're down over the last 5 and the last 3. And yet, the job gets more difficult for us, no matter how well we budget, no matter how responsible we are, the job becomes more difficult when other districts spend beyond their revenue limit, which we aren't doing, and we need the legislature to start taking a look at that. And one of the things that I would like to hear State Senator Bradley's opinion on is, why are we rewarding districts when their taxpayers say we're willing to pay more of our property taxes by also giving them more state aid? That formula needs to get looked at again. In my opinion, if Madison or Milwaukee or Eau Claire choose to increase their revenue by 170, 500, 600 million, then they still shouldn't get any more aid than what they would get if they were at their revenue limit, right? They choose to exceed it, that should fall all on the taxpayers that voted for it. If I don't get a chance to vote in that referendum, doesn't seem like it's equitable to the school district of Waukesha or any others that, I think New Berlin is one that is debt-free. And who was the other one that I saw that it looked like, and hadn't passed a referendum, and sometime just locally that I know of. Those districts shouldn't be losing state aid because other school districts choose, voters in other school districts choose to increase their own taxes locally. So I whatever opportunities I think we get to speak to legislators, we should be continuing to reinforce this. And I hope other districts will as well, because it's fundamentally unfair and punishes the most responsible of the school districts from a financial management perspective, like ours has been.
I think we're good. I would agree with Mr. Wad. And I do want to highlight the one point that he really referenced, which is we need to make sure that our community is aware that these unknown variables, and now specifically how the referendums or anything that happens with the new biannual budget, we don't know what that means, and it could have vastly significant swings in what the levy request would be. We just can't predict what that is right now, but there's a lot of stuff that is outside the control of this district and this board that is potentially going to come through that would have a very unfavorable impact, so.
We should also, for anyone who's watching, should highlight that the board, as we are losing or paying off our debt, has built in a I believe it was $5.4 million drop on our debt service levy to help bring stability into a fiscal year where, like I said, there's different breakout of the legislature. There's surpluses. There's a lot of arguments going to be had. There's probably some bad feelings about the $325 for 400 years. I mean, there's a lot of hurdles, but we've positioned ourselves, I think, the best we can to insulate them from a significant tax increase. But we can't promise that. there's just no way of knowing.
Agree. I think that's a fair point too, is to the pieces of our financial footprint that we can control, we are doing everything we can control it to eventually stabilize large fluctuations one way or another. Any other comments, thoughts before? Okay, seeing nothing further, the next discussion item that we have for tonight is the fund balance report.
Yeah, I thought a lot of this information in this fund balance report, I would group in with that as well, is kind of just laying the kind of the baseline of where we are heading into the 25-26 budget cycle. Now, the numbers we're going to go through are unaudited. The audit field work was completed in August and September. We hear from actually, Heather and I were just joking, we haven't heard from our auditors in several weeks, so we assume everything is in a good place. But again, I wanted to present this information today because we are right back into the budget conversation, and fund balance can be part of that solution or plan. So I broke it out, and I didn't go into a whole lot of details, but I just wanted to, because one of the questions we often get is, where are we on a percentage basis, because that's what fund balance refers to. So we have several categories of fund balance, some of them very large, some of them very specific in nature. The top one, non-spendable reserves. Being self-funded, we have to have a certain amount of reserves for UHC. And then we have a warehouse over at the service building that has assets on the shelves over there in the form of cleaning supplies and the sort. We have $5.3 million set aside in fund balance for our self-funded health insurance premium. Companies like to see us planning, and that's a lot of these things here are to show that we're planning, and also it's good fiscal policy as well. Common school funds, we don't always spend all the common school funds every year, so we reserve them or restrict them in fund balance so they can roll out of fund balance the following year to follow the state guidelines on those funds. Retirement obligations, we have 3.6, almost $3.7 million. If it was $3.67, I went to put it on here. For long-range retirement obligations. Site carryover, this is a program we've had that allows school sites to carry over unused dollars from their individual budgets. And then we have really what board policy drives down to is the unassigned fund balance general. So those final three categories, you divide by the subsequent year's expenditure budgets for Fund 10 and 27, which is about $200 million. So we find ourselves at 20.8 million, or 20.8% fund balance for the district. In green, just to show and demonstrate that we have used fund balance during the COVID years. For some years, we had very few expenditures. We didn't go out of our way to pay vendors beyond our contractual obligations. We laid off staff. Most districts didn't do that. Not that that was an easy decision, but after they got done enhancing unemployment benefits, I actually think some staff made out better with us laying them off than not, but it seems weird to relive those things. It seems so far away. But we budgeted a decrease in fund balance, and this was really part of the Phase 3 CIP projects, the south bleachers, the auditorium improvements, the HVAC upgrades, the chillers, I believe, at West and in other projects. Now, we budgeted a drop of $8.2 million. Looks like we're coming in at $7.2 million drop, but we are kind of surgically doing it on one-time expenditures, one-time money, and the same approach we had for ESSER. So any questions on Fund 10? Because the other ones aren't nearly as complex as Fund 10 is.
No, the only other comment I wanted to just highlight on this is we're starting to just pull into the prior conversation about prep of the next year's budget, is our unassigned fund balance actually will have things that are assigned. It'll still be in Fund 10, but we've got the curricular resources, we've got a list of things that we said that we are planning, whether that's infrastructure, TNL, that I'd like to see those broken out there, because in theory, we are planning for when they renew and having them restricted, with additionally making sure that the general fund, as it gets through it per our policy and audit requirements, is 15%. Just so that we can leverage that and see those pieces. But for the purposes of where we ended this year, I understand. But as we go into this next year, that needs to be broken out so that the board sees that.
Yeah, we've been talking about the curriculum material restriction or assignment of fund balance. And actually, Jen and I talked last week, and I think we're targeting coming in maybe in December or January here. She's going to lay out kind of the adoptions that she sees forthcoming. And then we're going to try to tie a financial package into it and make it all nice and neat. And then maybe the board can assign fund balance at any time, so it could come as a motion. Now, when we originally talked about it, in my head I had, well, normally we end with this summaries, positive position for fund balance. And I thought, well, we'll do half or some percentage. Well, this is the year that we went down $7.2 million, so that it didn't work. Otherwise, we would have probably already been in here reserving some amount of fund balance. But that's a forthcoming conversation. And again, whether it's bonding agencies or auditors, they like seeing planning. They like seeing reserve dollars for long-term obligations. So now, could I quantify the importance of that? No, but just in conversations I've had over the years, it is helpful. Moving on to Special Education Fund 27, they have no fund balance. They never do. At the end of the year, we do a transfer from Fund 10 that revenues, I can guarantee you, every year will match expenditures. It's not fiscal management. It's just the way that the nature of the beast. Fund 39, we ended the year at $6.87 million. 6.5 of that is for defeasance of, we're pre-funding the debt, so we're targeting that April 1st of 26 payoff date on the call date of the bonds. So we're in a good position there. Fund 41, we had built up, again, this goes to that phase 3 of the CIP projects. You run them through, those costs through Fund 41, there's an aid benefit to it. So we ran up Fund 41's fund balance, knowing that those projects all weren't going to happen in the first fiscal year. They crossed the summer, and now the last phase of that will be next summer at South High School. So we'll actually drive down that fund balance by the end of the fiscal year, or maybe some of it might roll over into the 25-26 to about $2.2 million. Still a good position to be in for long-range maintenance. Fund 46 is the capital expansion fund, similar to Fund 41. We have $2.1 million in there, and that, when it was created, was really designed for long-range replacement of large infrastructure projects. We didn't come out specifically and identify them, but we knew they were out there, turf fields or bleacher, bigger type projects like that. At some point we'd have to replace. So we decided years ago to start budgeting a $500,000 transfer into there every year, and obviously we've been doing it for about 5 years based on the numbers. So the Fund 49 is the property sales fund. This is back around 2000, I would say. The district owned a lot of property where Woodman's is and up that hill. That's where I think this fund started, was the Priedemann property, for anyone who remembers that name. And we started putting that money in there thinking we're going to have to be buying and selling property on a regular basis in the years ahead, at that time, for growth, oddly. So those funds are still there. When we sold Randall and Lindholm, the proceeds went into this fund as well. And again, I see this as a long-range infrastructure, land, facility, set-aside dollars for the long haul. Fund 50, we have a $3.7 million fund balance, but we're looking to spend that down to $3.3 million. And one of the biggest reasons for that drop in fund balance in Fund 50 is we're actually identifying the true costs of running that program. We're coding more custodial time there. If you go to an elementary school during the day, the head custodian spends probably 2/3 of their day with some phase of the lunch process, whether it's setup, helping them give out food and keep the cafeteria going and tear down. So we're more accurately addressing the costs so we can have a truer vision of the financial operation. We're in a good spot. We're also doing things like pods, and the pod for South that we just spent a lot of time talking about came out of fund balance as well. And then, as I mentioned, the fund balance for community service got up to $97,000. We budgeted to drop it back down to $27,000. We normally keep between $20,000 and $30,000 in fund balance in that category. So that's a near final audit number summary of our fund balances.
Any questions? Okay. And the last discussion item for the night is the monthly budget report.
Yes, so I just have a few things to just mention. Let's see. Under the budget chart, you will see in the non-capital objects that there was quite a dip from the budget last year to this year. That was due to the ESSER funds that we've talked about, so just to make sure that we're aware of that. Also, the completion of some of those, CIP projects. And so that's why that budget was revised down. October 1st, we did make our interest payment on our Fund 39 debt and everything. We set it up actually with a different organization, PMA, who also holds some of our funds, and they were incredibly helpful in that process. It went off with no issues whatsoever. And we are seeing interest rates coming down slightly on the investment report. If I look at those for July to October, in July, we were just over 5.2%, and for October now, we are down around 4.8%. I know that the Feds just dropped another 0.25 percentage points last week as well, so we'll be seeing those percentage points coming down a little bit more as the year goes on.
Any questions? Okay, moving into other business, are there recommendations for future committee meetings? Seeing none, we do have a need to adjourn to executive session. Does somebody want to motion us in?
I would move to adjourn to, executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, sub 1, sub E, for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session.
Second.
Okay, Tanya, do you want to take the roll?
Mrs. Kozlowski?
Aye.
Dr. Piasek?
Aye.
Mr. Wadd?
Aye.
Mr. Zenobia?
Aye.
And we are in closed session.